Hey friends, Asoka here. The interview you're about to watch is with Jason Langston. Jason Langston is a toy designer who has worked at Mattel, worked with NECA, DC Direct, a whole bunch of different toy companies. So he's got some great insider baseball into the world of action figures and what goes into making them. He also just completed a successful Kickstarter campaign for this book that I'm holding, A Baboon in My Room, which is a beautiful book that he wrote and illustrated. It's my daughter's new favorite book, so it's really awesome. Jason has an amazing story, some really great insights into everything, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Thanks so much for watching. Very special guest, Mr. Jason Langston.
How's it going, buddy?
I said Langston, and I was thinking about your name, like Kirk Langstrom, the man bat. That's what I always think about when I read your name. So.
Do you know that Ruben Martinez, he's a designer at Mattel. He's been there a really long time. He worked on DC stuff. He worked on Green Lantern movie. He's working on the new Masters. He always said Langstrom, and it used to drive me crazy. But now looking back, I'm like, no, it's probably because of Man Bat. It's
exactly, dude. I think you're good company.
Yeah, he's a doctor after all.
There you go. Well, Jason, there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
I want to talk about your Kickstarter. I want to talk about your time at Mattel.
Okay.
I want to talk about living in California, your family, a whole wide range of topics.
Okay.
Why don't we start with your Kickstarter, though? Because I'm so excited for you. You've succeeded. Just tell us about your Kickstarter campaign, how it started, kind of like how you've done it, So let's talk about that a little bit.
One thing I love storytelling, and I think that's why I love action figures so much, is because you can kind of like take the characters for movies, cartoons, stuff like that, and create your own stories out of them. But I always wanted to tell my own stories with my own characters. So doing books, writing kids books, it's kind of something I've always wanted to do. And I wasn't allowed to while I was at Mattel. You're not actually allowed to create your own IP because then Mattel will own it. It's kind of like part of the deal. So, I've been out of Mattel like almost 3 years now. And over the last year, I really wanted to I just had the bug. Like I just started like writing down ideas, like what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And it just kind of happened organically. I was writing a different story completely when I ended up writing this one. I just got stuck on that first one, and then this other one just came. So, creativity is kind of fleeting. It just comes when it comes. But I wanted to make something that made the kids laugh and made me laugh and made my wife laugh and stuff. So that's kind of how it came about.
So the name of it is There's a Baboon in My Room, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I have a daughter, I read her stories, and like, is that kind of where the idea came from as you're like reading stories to your kids, or like kind of where did that like specific idea like generate from?
We actually, the very specific idea of it was we really like rhyming games. We'll every now and then we'll just be really cheesy, and like if we're driving around in the car, we'll just take turns doing rhymes or doing like an alphabet game where we have to come up with like a superhero that starts with A, a superhero that starts with B. Like we just come up with different weird word games, and one of them is a rhyming game that we do, and we just kind of do it till we get bored or like just start laughing. And the Baboon in My Room, it started with this idea. I think my older son had a teddy bear, and it was at the bottom of the stairs. So he had a bear at the bottom of the stairs. And I was like, there's a bear at the bottom of the stairs. How did he get there? Does anybody care? Like, like something, beware, there's a bear, like it was just that whole idea. So it started off wanting to do that, like a bear at the stairs. And I started researching and realizing that there's already like tons of books about bears and everything. And I was like, I don't want it to be about a bear. So I just kind of like started generating, what if instead of it being a bear, it's a whole bunch of different animals, and what rhymes with the different animals, and that was kind of the genesis of it.
Dude, that's so awesome. That totally sounds like a kid's book, the way you describe the bear under the stairs. I read this llama llama book to my daughter, and there's all these llama llama rhymes in it.
Yeah.
And like when I saw that, I'm like, man, my daughter will love this book. So
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think we have like 7 or 8 of those llama books.
oh, dude, they're awesome. They're great. You
Yeah,
know,
they're really fun. We even have a couple of like board book ones. Those are like the short ones. Like, can
yeah.
I have another story? Yes, the short one.
Yeah, here's exactly when you're like, let's wrap it up, kid.
Yeah.
You know? But like, so you get the idea, you have the general idea of it. You're an artist, obviously. You're a creative storyteller. Like, what's the process like of actually creating the book? Do you like storyboard it out first? Do you write a script, then like draw it, and like how did you like create it?
It started off just primarily writing. I had done some sketches and stuff, but I didn't really know what I wanted it to be yet.
Yeah.
So my son was taking Taekwondo before COVID hit. And so I was sitting there just watching the kids do it. And I'd bring my iPad with me and I would just like jot down ideas. So I guess it started off with mostly writing. But like as I went along, it kind of, I ended up having to like rewrite, rewrite. Like
Yeah.
they started to like work together.
Okay.
But it, you know, after I got kind of like a general idea of what I wanted to, what I like, basically once I got the script, as you call it, like kind of written out, then I sat down and I did thumbnails and just sketched out like what does each page look like, and at some point I just kind of committed to doing 8x10s or 8x11 pages, and I pinned them up all on the wall with the words, and just looked at it for like a week or two, and my wife and I just stood there and were like, that part should move here, this doesn't make sense, let's take that off. It was kind of like when you see the storyboarding things in the like the behind the scenes at Pixar and stuff. That's kind of how it was. Like it was just like moving stuff around, and it actually helped me to finish the story, was to see like there has to be a through line, like what's the through line, what's going all the way from the beginning to the end. And so I kind of made it like a mystery, like why are these things happening in the house, so that the the punchline, as it were, is at the end of the book. But that kind of helped to get the story, just to see it visually.
That's awesome that you got your wife involved with it, that you guys were like are working on it together.
Yeah, it was fun. And I mean, as a creative, I'm kind of always craving approval.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest things about being kind of like a freelancer, being on your own, is you don't have anyone in the office to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
Like, when I've always been in creative, like even before Mattel, I worked in design agencies and stuff. And you could always show it to another designer. It didn't have to be your manager. It didn't have to be the creative director. It could just be like someone, a peer. Like, what do you think about this? And being a freelancer is harder because you don't necessarily have that.
Right.
So, my daughter is incredibly creative. My sons are very creative. My wife is very creative. So but that's not like it's not necessarily, they're not trained artists, which kind of helped. It's, they know what they like. So I could show them something, and if they don't like it, they're like, I don't like it. They can't tell me there's not enough volume in the chest. There's, you know what I mean? Like you need to adjust the eyes. Like they can't do that. But that was kind of, they helped having, being a part of that.
Dude, that's awesome. Like you got your wife and your kids involved. It's like almost like a family project. They must be so proud of you, man. Like to see it like finished and done.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, my wife has been. She's like, we're so proud of you, and I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, no, yeah, you are. We're so proud of you.
Dude, of course, man. And like it looks beautiful from the images I've seen. And dude, that's awesome. And you got it funded.
Yeah, that part was, definitely scary. It was just like getting the costs. I called a couple different printers and talked to them, and do I want to do it in the US so I don't have to pay shipping? I want to do it cheaper in China, but it's way more expensive to ship? Like it was all these things to try and figure out. That's not me. Like the marketing, the financial part, that's not my forte. So I wanted to launch it in December, and I spent the extra 2 months just making sure that I had the numbers right. And even still, like from the moment I launched it, I was like, I don't know if I'm asking too much. Like, I don't know if I did this right.
Wow, dude, I didn't even think about that. Like just the logistics of it. Like I remember when you put on LinkedIn that you were looking for a printer.
Yeah,
I didn't
that was
know
back in August.
Yeah, I didn't really know what you're doing, but it sounds like a great learning experience though, like to actually figure all that stuff out.
Yeah, and like when I was at Mattel, I had the benefit of a production team overseas that would go to the printers and do press checks and stuff. They would send us proofs, but by the time they got to us, they'd already been reviewed by several people, and they're like, do you agree with our comments? I was like, yes, I agree with your comments. Just go forward. Now it'll be me doing the press checks, which is really exciting.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that part.
And how many days do you have left on? Is like 3 or 4 more days on it?
It ends Saturday,
Okay.
March 6th at 11 a.m. So
Well, I'm sure it must be some relief that it's like got funded, right? I mean, after all the
yes, incredibly. And I kept getting all these marketing emails from just random people that were hitting me up through Kickstarter, like people I didn't know, like you'll never fund if you don't hire us to do it for you. And most Kickstarters fail. And it was just like I already had so much doubt about the whole thing, like I just wasn't sure. And to get those emails, I'm like, I just kind of like, I'll show you. I'll show you,
You did.
So yeah, I'm really excited. And I feel very fortunate and very loved that I've gotten so much support from, I know you backed, I really appreciate it. But like my friends, colleagues, people on Instagram, people I don't even know, people that I'm just casually friends with. It's awesome. Like I just feel very loved and very special. So I really appreciate all the support.
Backwards. So like take me back, you're a designer. I know you design packaging, you've designed action figures, you're doing books. Like when did the artistic side of you like emerge? Were you pretty young? Have you always been like an artist and that's kind of where you saw your life going, or how did you get here, I guess?
My mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
They had me very young. She was only 19 when I was born. And my dad was a contractor, so it was paycheck to paycheck all the time. So there was always this sort of like part of me that felt like I had to go to college. Like it's just something I had to do because I didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck like they do, and struggled. And it's hard on you as a kid to see your parents kind of struggle financially. They did fine. They're okay. But it was a struggle for them. So I knew I always wanted to do something. But I always loved cartoons and comic books and not movies so much as a kid. Like there's very few movies I got to see as kids, like Back to the Future was my favorite movie when I was a kid, and Ghostbusters and, Return of the Jedi. And, but cartoons were kind of like, I loved cartoons, but I never really imagined it could be a career because I just thought like, I need to find something where I could support a family like the whole time. Like I just knew like I had to go to college to get a career so that I can support my family, so we don't struggle.
Yeah.
And it's like, because I love my art classes and I always loved drawing and I was always into comics and stuff. And but I think it was my sophomore year of college at University of Arizona. I had a design professor. His name was Ron Spencer. And he used to do album covers for Velvet Underground, and he did one for Van Halen. And he comes in, he's got like turquoise jewelry on and a big cowboy hat and a giant belt buckle and cowboy boots. And he was just a rock star. Like he just walked in, and it was my intro to graphic design class. And he just walks in and he's just the coolest guy. And he used to be friends with Matt Groening, who created The Simpsons. And he showed me that like you can make a living. He's like graphic design is artistry that you can make a living at. There's people that paint and they just work so they can have a studio to paint, and it's it's admirable, it's amazing, but I always knew I wanted to support a family, and I wasn't that good a painter. So I had to find something in art that I felt comfortable that I could like take care of a family, because that was something I always wanted as a kid. And it was Ron who showed me that like, you have talent for graphic design, you should pursue this, you should go for it. And I just kind of stayed that course. Like it was just kind of it. Like I wanted to be an animator, and I was taking computer classes and stuff, and it didn't click for me, but graphic design did. And I just kind of like kept going with that.
Wow. Let me ask you something. Like you mentioned your parents, they live paycheck to paycheck. And for some reason though, like it sounds like the lesson you got from that is you didn't want to live like that. You wanted to like be, it sounds like they were great providers, but you wanted to be, more, I guess, stable, if that's the right word. Like, I'm curious, like how early did you start like feeling that way? Was it just something you just kind of always felt, just, from what you experienced?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I attributed it to they just struggled so much, and I didn't want to feel that. the funny thing is, as I've gone along through my career, I realized that I'm more like my dad than I realized. That he loved getting projects from different clients. He would go work on a house, and he'd work on a house for a month or two, and then that'd be it. The project be done, and he'd move on
Yeah.
to another thing. So I definitely learned my work ethic from watching him, just like finishing projects and moving on to the next one. And so I, like, in my career now, I love getting projects, finishing them, and moving on to the next one. Like, it's just kind of, I like, it's funny we're talking about it, I'm just realizing like I'm more like my dad than I realized.
Yeah, sounds like it. And like, is it is it just like you like a new experience of working somewhere new, like every few months? Is that like, is it appealing for you? Can you even like kind of describe why you like that?
It's not so much the location, it's sort of the, like, for me it's the design challenge.
Yeah.
Like I like solving problems. I think that's what graphic design really is. It's just, you're just solving. It might just be creative in general, but it's solving a problem. Someone comes to you who doesn't do design, who doesn't know how to do it, and they hand you a sheet of words and says, I need a logo, and I need it to be this, 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 and this, but I don't know what that looks like. Can you show me what that looks like? So you have like your own idea of what it could be, and you try to like win them over with what your vision is, but you have to make sure it checks the boxes for them. But for me, like, I just like solving challenges. I like different puzzles and stuff, and getting new things to sink my teeth into.
Interesting. Like, so you mentioned cartoons a lot when you were younger.
Mm.
It's funny you mentioned those movies. You're right. When we were kids, we had like 5 movies we all love that we're all connected to. Because nowadays I have like 1,000 things, right? It's so different. But like, when did like the DC universe come into your life, or the Marvel universe? Like, were you into the cartoons growing up, or were you reading comic books, or like what was your first exposure to like superheroes and comics?
Let's see, comics. I would say like the dawn of Jason Justice was,
Yeah.
we had just moved to Tucson. We lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut till I was 10, and we moved across country when I was 10 years old to Arizona. And I was pretty lonely. All my family was back east, and
Yeah.
here we are living in a complete new state I knew nothing about. We had no family, and and I saw Emerald Dawn #2, Green Lantern Emerald Dawn #2 on at the Quick Mart, and it was on the newsstand. And I saw, I was like, and it's that cover where Hal's like this and the bricks,
Yeah.
and he's up messed up, and the green on the red bricks with the dead end sign. It just caught my eye, and I remembered him vaguely from Super Friends. Like, I was like, and my little brother was with me. He's 2 years younger than me, so he didn't really remember. I was like, Ben, did you see this? Do you remember this guy from Super Friends? And he's like, no. And I was like, what happened to this guy? So I saved up my allowance and I bought that comic. And then as I read it, there's always advertisements for other things. And there was an advertisement for the new Robin series. And it was that cover with Robin with the,
Yeah.
with the cape like this, and Norm
Course.
Brayfogle, and he's got the cape like this, and Batman's just standing behind him. And I was like, what do you mean new Robin? That costume's awesome. What are they talking about, new Robin? And so like that just spiraled this whole thing. And I think DC is what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Like it was like the legacy of everything. I wanted to know, why is there a new Robin? Why, what do you mean there's been multiple Green Lanterns? Like there's just, I wanted to learn more.
Yeah.
What the comics that they had at the swap meet, we'd go to the swap meet in Tucson, and there'd be a few comic vendors, which is just boxes on tables, right? And I'd flip through and I'd just pick covers I liked, and it'd be like Barry Allen and Green Lantern together. I'm like, boom, done. I got Flash and Green Lantern. I can read this. But to find out that like a few years before I started reading, Barry Allen died, and now it's Wally West. I was like, well, who's Wally West? What's this about? And it was always like something to keep me interested. But that was kind of like that one moment at the Quick Mart in 6th grade. That was kind of like the beginning of it.
I know, man. I have similar experiences. Just like, seeing a cover, like, the drugstore, where they used to sell comics and stuff, right? You have no idea what the story is. You buy an issue, it's in the middle of some weird story. Like you said, there's like someone who's the Green Lantern, but not the Green Lantern. Like, why does Hal Jordan have like, white temples? You know what I mean? Like things like that.
Yep.
So did you like just from that point on, were you always collecting comic books until like adulthood, or did you like stop and start, or like how long did you continue that for?
It was, we'd hit the swap meet every so often, be like once a month or twice a month. And then I started doing a little bit more research and finding out there's actually a comic shop not that far from the house. And, most comic shops aren't, I don't know, I always kind of had this feeling that they're not really excited when kids walk in the door, because comics aren't really for kids. Not really. Like, we want to think they are, but they really aren't. They haven't been for a very long time.
Right.
And they're really for like teenagers and older, or young adult kind of like and older.
Yeah.
And so when I walk in, and I'd already loved like Ninja Turtles, like that was my favorite cartoon that was on at the time. And I was like, Ninja Turtle comics. Oh, I want this one. And the comic shop owner's like, no, because it was a mirage. He's like, that's not for you.
That's not what you had. That's not what you're looking
at.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I love Ninja Turtles. He's like, that's not the one you want. Like the Ninja Turtle Adventures, that's the one you want, But I collected, I would say from like 91 till 95. Yeah. Pretty heavily, and it got heavier and heavier and heavier. It was like I was getting to a point where I was going every week. I'd just ride my bike to the comic shop and I'd spend $20, and then they were just piling up and I wasn't reading them anymore. Yeah. And and like I played baseball in high school, and it was starting to take all my time away from everything. And I got into band when I was in high school, so that was starting to take my free time away. And so by the time I got to like college, I didn't have money and I didn't have time. So it just kind of like faded away after that.
Wow. When you got to like to college, I guess, I guess we can talk about this a little bit more, but so you talked about your graphic design, how you kind of got set on that path. Like, when did you end up, or actually before you got to Mattel, like what was your jobs like? Were they like, were you for agencies that you weren't really into, or kind of like what was your experiences like before you got to Mattel?
My first design job out of college was at a medical instruments company, because again, I was being very pragmatic that I had to find a job that paid well, not necessarily that was fulfilling. I was like, I need something that pays. And I had a couple different offers from different places, and the medical company is the one that paid the most. They're down in Orange County. So I took the job, and I was miserable for 6 months. I was absolutely miserable. It was like, I wasn't engaged. It wasn't interesting to me, but I thought, it's a job. You have to do it.
Sure.
Or, and I had moved out here for the job. So I was like, now, so 6 months in, they're like, we decided we don't want a designer on staff anymore. And I was like, wow, what am I going to do now? Like, this is crazy. And part of me wishes I could go back and be like, dude, don't take the first thing that comes along. Find something that you like. But, when you're right out of college, you got to take what you can get, So I wouldn't have listened to me anyway. But after that, I ended up getting a job at Jack's. And so I had to move up to LA, and I worked there for about a year. And that's when I'm like realizing that, oh, you can work on fun stuff. Yeah. You could be a designer and do stuff that you like. But I didn't have a very good experience at Jack's. I was only there for a year and they laid me off. So after that, it took me a while to find another design job, and I ended up working I got a job at a design agency in Marina Del Rey. And I worked there for a few years. Then I worked at another agency for a couple of years. And I ended up at Mattel in like 2010. So
like, did you like target Mattel specifically because of the DC stuff, or were you just basically looking for work and Mattel seemed like a fun company to go to?
I live in South Bay of LA, and Mattel is right there. And I wasn't like a huge collector. I had a few things because I was working, but I wasn't really just paying attention. Like, I missed the whole Toy Biz, Marvel Legends era, like the whole thing. But one of the design agencies I worked at, a friend of mine, he had worked at Mattel prior, then came to work at the agency with me, and then went back to Mattel. And I had gotten laid off in 2000. That's a recurring theme in design jobs, is getting laid off. It happens a lot. Because I got laid off in 2009, not too long after the stock market had crashed. And my friend Dien, he's like, hey, I know you're a big nerd. You would love to come. My group is looking for a designer, packaging designer. why don't you come in and interview? And so he put my name in, and it wasn't actually the first time I had interviewed there. I had interviewed there like 2 years prior for Hot Wheels, and didn't get it. And I'm glad. I don't think I would have worked out in Hot Wheels. Just cars aren't my thing. But when I went in for my interview for Hot Wheels, it was Boys Action.
Yeah.
To work on Disney and stuff like that. The design director interviewed me. He's like, what do you like to do for fun? And I said, well, my wife's pregnant. She's been pretty ill through the pregnancy. So I built my own proton pack for Ghostbusters picture. And he's just like, holy crap. And I was like, yeah, I just, and he goes,
what did you build that out of, by the way? Like,
I made it out of MDF and some like I got actual pieces from, some of the pieces are still being manufactured. So I was able to get some of those, and I was on the Ghostbusters, the GB fan site. I can't remember what they're called anymore because it's been so long, but it was like eBay and trying to find as many found parts as I could. And the rest of it, I built out of MDF. But he was so bowled over by that. It's like, this guy is a super nerd. We need him. We need this guy in here. And so, and the rest is kind of history, I guess.
Wow. So when you got to Mattel, you're doing packaging designs. Like, what did you work on first there? Like, what was your first experience? I guess, what was your first day like at Mattel? When you get to Mattel, huge building, storied company. Like, were you like excited, or like, is it just sort of like another job? You're like, all right, let's do this for a while. Or how did you feel about it?
I might have skipped in the building. I was so excited. Yes. And I had just started collecting DC classics.
Yeah.
So like, I wanted to ask everybody everything about all the stuff that they were working on. Like, what is this? What is this? What's like I just wanted to absorb as much information as I could.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I was brought in to work on Disney Toy Story. And the first week I was there, there's someone working on Max Steel who quit, and it caused this kind of carousel. Everyone switched around, and I ended up on the DC team, the DC/WWE team, with my manager, at the time, Ryan Gleason. And he grew up with Star Wars, and he was a Green Lantern fan and stuff, and he was working on Green Lantern, and I would just go over by his cube, and I'm like, Ryan, what are you working on? Let me see what you got. Let me see your Green Lantern stuff. And it was just like, I just kept hounding him. I was like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And he ended up handing me the reins to Green Lantern movie. That was my first like major project that I got to do. But there was a few other little things I got to do, but Green Lantern movie was like the big one.
It's funny because I think the toy line is actually better than the movie.
Incredibly, yes.
Like I have some of them behind me over there actually, and like I'm still buying those aliens, from that line, and the packaging is fantastic. It's kind of the dark green aesthetics and things like that. Like, what was your approach to designing that packaging? Like, where do you even start with that? Do you just like do a bunch of, examples or storyboards of it, or did you have people telling you kind of what to do, or was it all you basically?
Oh no, it was definitely not all me, and none of the projects really are all you anyway. One thing that Ryan had taught me is that they pay their designers for ideas. They don't necessarily pay you to iterate. So they want you to find vendors that can execute your ideas. So I had to learn really quickly, because I was used to doing all the design by hand and pushing pixels by myself. I had to learn very quickly that it was different inside, that I had to learn how to find good partners, good design agencies to hire, and then art direct them. And because I ultimately had to present the work to the licensors, to marketing and stuff like that. And Warner Brothers was fun because Mattel and Warner Brothers had such a great relationship for a long time, that they were way ahead of any other. They were way ahead of any other licensees. Mattel was so far ahead of any other licensees that we would get to design the style guides for them.
Yeah.
So they're like, here's a movie coming out. We're like a year and a half in advance. So we would have to design the packaging already. as they're still working out the movie. Whereas like other licensees like toothpaste and bed sheets and stuff like that, they hadn't even gotten there yet. They're only like 6 months or whatever.
Nice.
So, when we get to design the packaging for it, we were influencing what their entire program was going to look like for everybody. With Green Lantern, Ryan had already started on it, and he kind of brought me in to just keep it moving and get it like cleaned up and add little details. Like I added the like Green Lantern oath and the ring around the had it etched in there. And he and I stayed late one night to figure out how to incorporate. There's a ring that came with every basic figure, and everywhere we put it, it just looked like this just big hunk of green plastic. And I said, what if we incorporated it with the key art? Like we have Hal coming up and you have the key art here, and it looks like force perspective. And I honestly think that was a moment that like Ryan kind of like Ryan and I fell in love with each other at that point. He was just like this, that's a great idea. And he, worked it out and said, go make this work. But but that's just a small part of it, because then once you get that design look, you get that style guide done, you hand it off to production artists overseas and they execute a lot of the packages for you, and you're just overseeing it. So you kind of you go from art directing vendors to then sort of being the creative director for production team overseas, and they're sending you packages. So it's a very unique experience at Mattel for sure.
Interesting. So you weren't actually there like in Photoshop building the packages and designing it. You were like kind of coming up with ideas, giving it to other teams to sort of execute, and you're like, making decisions about it, like saying if it's good or not, then presenting it to like Warner Brothers.
It's a little of both, but yeah, I was pretty hands-on, and there'd be times like even if I had a vendor create something that was almost there, rather than send them another round of changes because I wasn't articulating, I would play with it for sure. So I would be hands-on, and I was fortunate that I feel pretty comfortable in Photoshop and Illustrator that I can manipulate things if I'm not getting what I want. Or, in some cases you get all this creative and then you show it to the teams and they're like, and this always happens, I like this from column A, I like this from concept B, I like this from this part here. Can you combine those all together? I was like, yeah, but I'm not going to pay a vendor to do that. I'll just do that and show you what it looks like, because it's going to look like dog's breakfast,
And like, so did you have to be cognizant of like budgeting with like vendors? Like, okay, I can save some money on our budget if we don't pay them to do the change.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And Mattel's a big company, so they have more money to spend. But I've worked at other companies that didn't have as much, so you would end up having to do a lot of it yourself. But yeah, being budget conscious for sure. You don't have like a American Express black card that you can just go out and just get whatever. But really, I found while I was there, they valued volume. They of course valued quality, but they wanted quality and volume. And what I was able to do when I went in there was just take on a lot. Like I didn't just do DC. I was also doing Masters of the Universe. And I was doing a little line called Prehistoric Pets. And I was doing the Retro Action line that was the like Mego like dolls.
Oh yeah.
The 8-inch ones. And I was doing that. And I was helping out on WWE. And I had, so I looked at our org chart, and everyone had their brands assigned to them. And it'd be like, 2 people, 3 people working on WWE. And there'd be 1 person working on Cars and 1 person working on Toy Story. And then me, it was like Ghostbusters, Masters, Green Lantern, it was just like the list that went on and on and on. And but it's because, again, I like solving puzzles and I like the variety. Like I like the different challenges that would come.
That's awesome, dude. Let me ask you, with Green Lantern specifically, when the movie didn't do so well, like, were you emotionally invested in that a little bit more because of the line? Were there disappointment like within Mattel, what happened with the movie, and like you didn't get to go on with it, or like what was it like back then?
I was crushed, and the crazy part was, so I was a temp for the first year and like 5 months that I was there. I ended up getting made full time right before the Green Lantern movie came out, and there was a licensing show in Vegas. So all the executives went to Vegas. And when the Green Lantern premiere happened, they had extra tickets, and Ryan, bless his heart, said, "You worked so hard on this. I want you to have my ticket. I want you to go." So I got to go to the premiere, and it was amazing. And I never got to do anything. I never got to go to a premiere again after that, right? Because it just, I didn't know that. You know, it was like my first year there, and this happened. I was like, it's like being a rookie who wins the World Series and then spends 25 years on a losing team. You know, like I went in there and it was like, oh my God, this is what I get to do. Like, this is incredible. So I was in the audience at the premiere watching the movie, and there's, you know, Ryan Reynolds is there, Blake, you know, I hate that I'm doing this name dropping thing. And it was just,
that's great.
I'm this like, you know, poor kid from Arizona who is in this amazing, just surreal experience. And the movie, when the movie ended, I was pretty bummed. I was like, that is not what I wanted. Like my 10-year-old self that discovered Green Lantern was not excited by it. Like my 30-year-old self that was watching at the time was really crushed, like disappointed. And then they're like, all right, now to the after party. And I was like, after party? And you go, and I'm like, now I got to talk to the people that worked on the movie and just like, I mean,
especially going back to you in that drugstore, you know, Emerald Dawn. Now you're like in the Green Lantern, the first Green Lantern movie ever.
And I had snuck a Green Lantern ring with me too, and I was wearing a Green Lantern ring. And I was with Matt Emmert, he was the copywriter, and Brandon Sapinski was there, and Scott Knightley were there. So it was sort of the four of us, and I think, I'm trying to remember who else was there. I think Steed's son, he was the the product design director. He was there too, and we, you know, the movie was not great. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen. No. You know, like when you, like, to me, I know this is controversial for a lot of people. I'm not a fan of the Zack Snyder DC films. So comparatively, I enjoy Green Lantern much more, but it's not a movie that I love. And it's not one I'm in a hurry to show the kids. It's just sort of disappointing. And I was disappointed because the little kid in me wanted to love that movie. And I just didn't. It just didn't feel that way.
It was a very strange time. Like, the trailers look great. Like, I liked everything about it up until I saw it, you know?
The trailer was phenomenal. I remember being at Best Buy and like going into, like, such a nerd, I went into the like computer section and I played it super loud, like the trailer, and it was like dun 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 dun. I was just like, this is amazing. And they showed Abin Sur and he's like crashing to earth, and I was like, this is everything I wanted. And it was just so, it was, oh man, it was crushing.
It was so bizarre. I wonder, well, let me ask you, when you went to the after party and you talked to people, like, did you like get any sort of vibe that they knew it was gonna be what it was, or did everyone think it was gonna be great? Like, I'm curious, did you get anything from that?
I don't know. You know, so this was my big Hollywood moment, right? I had two while I was at Mattel. This was my first one, and it was amazing. Mark Strong and his wife were the most pleasant and wonderful people there.
That's great.
They were just so gracious and so kind. And I just kept, I was like, and I don't even remember if I knew Mark Strong from anything. Maybe from the Sherlock Holmes film. Had that come out by that time?
Ooh, that might have been after. Actually, I don't know.
I feel like it was before.
It could have been, yeah.
And I just said, of like, you elevated Sinestro. Like, I thought you just were so great. Like, it was such a bummer at the end that they forced that Yellow Lantern scene, because it just didn't feel right. Like, I was like, I'd rather watch a movie about Sinestro than Hal, because he was just so interesting and so compelling. And he was so nice. Everybody else was fine. Like, it was just kind of like, it was fine. But like, that was my favorite moment, was talking to
That's
Mark
awesome.
Strong. Yeah.
Okay, whatever about the movie, you had a great experience that night.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Yep.
I mean, come on. So you, at this point, you're doing packaging design. Like, when do you start actually art directing like action figures? Like, and what exactly is that when you're like the art director of like an action figure line? Like, I guess, and how did you get there?
That's a lot of questions.
I'm sorry. I went all over the place.
Well, because I asked a lot of questions, and I was always trying to learn more and talk to a lot of people. I had discovered that Bill Beneke was at Mattel, and he was working on DC, and he was on that pretty much the entire time he was there. He's still there now. He's on WWE now. We worked together at Jax a long time ago. Like, he's one of the few people that I remembered but we weren't particularly close. It was just like, hey, don't I know you? Like, hey,
Yeah.
don't I know you? It's been, 6 years, 7 years, like, and we became like instant friends from that. And so we had a really great relationship, and I could ask him questions, or we can talk. And there's very much a stay in your lane kind of philosophy. Like if you're in packaging, you stay packaging. Try to keep your comments to packaging. If you're in product, you try to keep your comments to product. And I tried very hard to be respectful and just build up my relationships with everybody, so that if I had questions about product, I could ask. I could say something like, that accessory would be blue. And I'm like, it would look better if it was red because it reads like water. If you're trying to get it to look like something, maybe, change it to yellow or whatever, because it looks like water.
Yeah.
And a lot of those conversations would happen kind of just like small groups, but I was always raising my hand. I was always speaking. And I think one of my managers had said at one point to me, like, have you ever considered doing product? And I said, no, do you think I'd be good at it? And he's like, yeah, you have an eye for this. You have a natural talent for, toys. Like you love toys. Why don't you try?
Yeah.
And so I applied for a cars product design position. And they were very kind. They let me interview with the whole team, interview with the marketing team, interview with the director. And I guess I got pretty far, but there was a designer who was a temp, and they were going to lose him if they didn't give him the full-time position. So he got the position, and rightfully so. The guy had been there a long time. He's a trained industrial designer, and that was always kind of to my detriment. I didn't have an industrial design background. I was just a graphic designer. But ever since that seed had been planted, I was like, I would really like to try this. I'd really like to go for it. And I had suffered a personal tragedy, and in 2016, my wife and I, we lost our son. After that, everything kind of changed in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't feeling anything about, like, I just wasn't excited about package design. I wasn't excited about life in general. I just wasn't. It was just going to work was just like going through the motions. Like for life in general was just going through the motions for a long time. And that year I was just really down, and things weren't going. I was just kind of like just doing the job. Like it was just a job that was just going in. And Bill came to me and he said, hey, do you want to work on some stuff with me? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I'm slammed with, what he was working on at the time. He's like, I could use some help on Multiverse. Can you just do a couple things? And I had done some stuff from before, like, can you trace the Superman shield for me? And can you make a vector graphic of this? And can you make the backer cards for the old Multiverse? Like there's like just random like graphic design projects he'd have me do for product. And I'd always be happy to, like, absolutely, anything other than just the packaging that gets thrown in the recycling bin, And in that year, Bill he came to me, he's like, why don't you help me with some stuff and just see how it goes? And before I knew it, he was handing me an entire wave to work on. So it's really, I mean, my brother, I love him. Like he gave me that opportunity to work on toys.
So did that kind of like, after what happened with your son, did that like kind of help like with the healing, kind of like having kind of a new focus, something like that?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we did a lot of counseling, and I still see a therapist, and to help kind of that, because the wound never really goes away.
Yeah.
But it definitely gave me a renewed excitement to go in, because at that point I had been working there 6 years. I had tried my hand at management, packaging managing, and it was like, is this the track I want to go on? And I was doing less and less design work, and I wasn't feeling fulfilled.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm just managing people, and I wasn't excited by it. It just felt like I was failing. It's like, this isn't what I was trained to do. I don't know how to do this. I didn't feel like I was getting a whole lot of help. And then people that were my peers, who were my friends, I started feeling a distance, and it was killing me, So before my son had passed away, I had already stepped down, and so I was already feeling kind of like, what am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing? And then just got hit with losing Calvin, that I just was completely like, I don't know what I'm doing at all. So so when Bill's like, you want to try this, and you know, it was a new challenge, it was new things for me to do. And the crazy part was I was still doing my packaging design work. I was essentially doing a job and a half. Like I was doing all my responsibilities for packaging, and then taking on this product stuff, even if it meant working late or working at home. I didn't care because I was so excited about working on it.
So when you say you're working on the product, like, what does that mean exactly? Like, they have figures and you're trying to figure out how they work, or are you coming up with the characters they're going to be in these waves? Like, what were you doing exactly?
There's a lot to toy design in general. And what I was doing, just action figures, coming up with accessories and characters. Some people come up with much more complex things. Like I couldn't design a Beyblade. There's no way. Like I just don't understand how they work. That's just not for me. A complex mechanism, no. And that's where my lack of industrial design background would come to play. But with something like action figures, I collected them. I've had them in my life, since I was little. Like I had superpowers figures when I was little. I had Star Wars figures when I was little. Like they'd always stayed with me. So so for me, like to answer your question, sorry, the very genesis of packaging, the whole product design, is the marketing team comes up with, they call it slots and rats. It's slots and rationales. And it's like, here's how many SKUs you're going to have. Here's the price points. And here's what we think they should be. So we should have 4-inch figures. We should have a deluxe 4-inch figure. We should have a vehicle. We should have a play set. We should have role play items. And that's how the line comes. And that's when they hand the paper over to design and say, okay, now this is the price points. This is what you're aiming for. Go make stuff. And so what I would get to do with Bill, because Bill, he's my mentor, he's also my manager for design, we would come up with characters, because I just worked on Multiverse for the most part. I got to do some other stuff later, but in the beginning it was just and I think that's what probably your audience is most interested in, is my DC stuff. But we would come up with characters, and we're like, who's the Build-A-Figure? What are the themes? What are we looking for? What anniversaries are this year? Or what TV shows are on? What movies? What can we say? Like, it's the 30th anniversary of The Dark Knight Returns. It's, that kind of stuff. So we'd come up with like the strategy for all the characters, and then we'd show it to marketing. We'd take their feedback, and we'd have to try to win them over. Like, hey, Bill and I are the collectors. We know that this is what they're looking for. Then you go to Warner and you present it to Warner and DC. And Warner would say, looks great. And DC would look at it and say, not a priority character for us. Can we get this character in there? All looks great for the most part, that kind of stuff. Then, so that's like the concepting start, right? That's just like a small portion of it. Then what I would get to do is you would put together like the look that you want for the figure. So you're pulling assets, you're pulling different visuals. And you could draw the accessories that you want if you have a specific idea, or you can pull pictures from the content. And we worked really closely with the Four Horsemen, longtime partners of Mattel. They worked on He-Man, the 2000X He-Man line, and I believe they still work together. And they're all, I love them dearly. Jim and Eric and Cornboy and the gang over there. They're wonderful. And so you'd hand them the concept sheets. And because I had the benefit of this being a long process, they've been doing DC Classics for so long and everything, it was like, all I had to do was give them a concept sheet, and they would either sculpt it themselves or hire their own team, their own vendors to work on things and send us the sculpts. So I would get like a gray model, right? A gray model would come in, and I'd look at it and I'd say, like Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner Green Lantern was one that was very near and dear to me. I really wanted to do that figure. When it came in the first pass, the crab mask was just a whole bunch of different angles. And the crab mask, if you look at it, is really truly hideous. Like as a design, like it's just layer upon layer upon layer of 90s excessiveness. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Right. But like when I looked at it, like my eye was just bouncing around, and it was just like I couldn't find peace with it. So I would go in and I would take the front and the side and the 3/4, and I would just manipulate in Photoshop, or draw lines and say, I want these lines to match, I want these lines to match. Send it back to the Horseman. they're always like, awesome, we'll take a look at it. You're, great comments. And then it would come back. That's step 2, because then you have to get the sculpt approved. You send the sculpt in to the Warner Brothers consumer team. They could either send comments or not, or, they'll approve it or send comments, whatever. Then you turn it over to China team. China team then gets to work with their safety standard type stuff. So you notice there's like, if you ever see a paint master, like for Batman Beyond, paint master had like these beautiful long sharp points on the gauntlets, right? Long pointy ears. By the time the figure comes out, it's like a soft rubber with like terrible radiuses on it, because first and foremost, it's a toy. They're making it 3+, so it has to work for kids 3 and older.
You can't stab someone with Batman,
Yes, yeah. Whereas like NECA, Super 7, they're doing 18+. They don't have they're not susceptible, they're not held to the same standards as far as that. So they can do plastics a little more brittle because they're definitely targeting adults. But Mattel have made kid toys first and foremost. So, but you would get some of that stuff, and sometimes the things are just way overdone. You look and you're like, whoa, like that just, you lost the sculpt. Like we got to back it up. Like let's try and find a happy medium here, or can we just make this a softer plastic so we can keep the points on his ears or something like that?
Yeah, what a process.
Yeah, it's long. It's really long, and and you're kind of at the mercy, but at the same time, you're aided by an entire team of engineers and sculptors overseas who are looking at this, because they're looking at it as like what's manufacturable. They want to make sure that they can get this in a machine and cranking it out and staying on schedule. So you get that first sample and it comes in. It's gray. It's called a tooling model. It's usually gray. It's made out of resin. And you put all the pieces together and you try to test it out, because that's before the mold is made. They look at it and you're trying to make sure you try to catch as much as you can before that mold is made, because once the mold is made, it's very difficult to get any changes made. Once that's approved, then they do, I've heard them called first shots. I've heard them called test shots. I've called SASs. Like everybody has different comments for what that is, but it's basically like a prototype. And they shoot whatever plastic they have laying around into the machines. And that's where you'll see, like, if you ever go on eBay and you see like prototype or whatever, and it's like pink arm and a purple chest and, just random plastics. That's the first shot.
Question for you there, Jason.
Yeah, sure.
When at that stage, like, how thorough are you in scale is always an issue for everyone, right? Are you taking that figure, putting it next to a bunch of other figures to make sure the scale's correct? You have to be that thorough in looking at this guy, and are multiple people looking at the figure?
Not by that point, it's too late. So what you want to try and do is do that before they even make the tooling model.
Okay.
So you're getting, because if you're looking at figures in a vacuum, you can't tell. I think that's how that year 0 Batman ended up gigantic, because I think he was looked at in isolation. He wasn't looked at the rest of the line. So you want to look at them together and try and scale them appropriately, and shrink things. But that's while they're still engineering it.
Wow.
So that's before they even do that part. Yeah.
Have you ever gotten to the point where a figure got that far along and then it's canceled? Or pretty much?
Yeah. Simon Baz was tooled. We got painted samples. So you call them what do they call this? FEPs. So final engineering products. It's the last step before they go to production pilot, which is the production line. Simon Baz was almost done. They didn't do the deco properly, but Mattel had lost the license by the time he was going to get going, and so they just cut a whole bunch of stuff, and he was one of the figures that cut. But he was tooled, and they made him.
And so you got in right when it just became the multiverse with the were you on the blue packaging or the red packaging? That's why I look at it.
I designed the red packaging,
okay.
and then I moved to the product on the the blue packaging. So that from that first wave, I was doing a few things here and there, but it wasn't until the Lex Luthor wave that I was full in on the
dude, which is a fantastic wave. That Lex Luthor Build-A-Figure, bro, that whole
Thank you.
the last few waves of the multiverse, man, like some gems. Like it wasn't perfect, nothing is, but like for me it was, like that Red Robin figure, bro. How involved were you with the Red Robin figure?
That was, I mean, that was a figure I wanted to do really bad.
Yeah.
Because Tim Drake's one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character. But I took him all the way up to sculpt, and we showed the gray model at Comic-Con, and then I got laid off the day I got back from Comic-Con. So that was as far as I got, as far as like, so I did the concept, I got the sculpting done, and then I was like, oh, but and Bill was overseeing everything, and he was finishing the line anyway.
All right, well, we'll get to that part, but like one question I had, so it felt like near the end of the multiverse line, there's like a whole bunch of different, like they're going off in tangents, right? You have like the die-cast metal Batman and Superman from Injustice. Then all of a sudden you have like the Penguin, John Wesley Shipp, Flash, and Batman Forever, Val Kilmer, which is amazing. Like, was that an attempt by Mattel to like really start to broaden out? Were they trying to keep the license? Like, what do you know the thought process with those lines?
I know it's very competitive, right? Yeah. Getting shelf space is very competitive. And I think there was an ask to grow multiverse because they pretty much had just one peg. And I feel like I remember there being a retailer request for that Heath Ledger Joker, like really wanting that. And I don't know whose concept it was to do, because I think they were $5 more, right?
Yeah, they're a little pricier, yeah.
Yeah, they were an extra $5 because they came with a base. Take her to leave it. I don't know if I love that base or not, but it was cool. It was a cool piece.
Yeah.
But it was neat, definitely neat to get a John Wesley Shipp Flash figure. I think that was probably the best figure from all that. But I know that Bill wanted to get to doing more classic characters like that. Like I know he wanted to do a Mr. Freeze from Batman and Robin, and Carrie Riddler and Robin, Chris O'Donnell Robin, and so I know he wanted to get to all those things, but those were all 100% tooling, so they're really tough to do in the multiverse line because you can't really do 100% tooling on everything. Now, of course, McFarlane's cranking out 100% tool on everything, and Mattel prioritized core, not collector. We all worked very hard on collector, and we're very passionate about collector, but for the most part, core is where the money was. That 6-inch figure or 12-inch figure or whatever. Like that's what Mattel was mostly concerned with.
Really? So like multiverse wasn't considered core, like even though they were 6-inch? Like
no, it's considered. So they divided up the businesses. That's considered collector.
Oh wow!
And that's how they were able to chop up the license so that McFarlane has collector, and then Spin Master has core, and then Fisher Price has preschool. So it's yeah.
So during this time, you're working on a freaking Kyle Rayner, figure. How awesome is that for you? Like, is it just like thrilling? Like, this kind of what you've always wanted? In some way?
I had made, so we had to come up with a filler wave that was sort of low tooling to try and help with financials for that year, because we had a lot of expensive figures. And so I was tasked, I think Bill was in China, or he was just swamped, and he had asked me to come up with some concepts for what could that look like, reusing a lot of tools, minimal tooling. And I told you I read comics in the 90s. I wanted to do an entire 90s wave. So I came up with it was the Jim Ballant Catwoman, Impulse, Kyle Rayner first appearance. I wanted to do a Kingdom Come figure. Oh, I did. So I did Kingdom Come Superman, and I wanted to do a Batman and Parallax. I really wanted to do Parallax. And so that's kind of like where that wave came from. I was fortunate because when DC saw it, they said, wait a minute, we don't want to do 90s. We're prioritizing Rebirth now. So we only want to do Rebirth stuff. And, Kingdom Come Superman is in there. So Kingdom Come Superman is a part of the storyline now. So you can keep him. Kyle Rayner has a new logo, but he's using a classic costume. So you can keep that figure, which saved us. And then you can keep, I can't even remember who else was in the wave at this point, but they killed Valiant, Catwoman, and they killed Impulse, and which is a shame because Impulse ended up coming back right around the time that the figure would have come out. But yeah, that one hurt for sure.
It still hurts that you never got to Wave Rider, even at the DC Universe Classics. I mentioned this to you before. That's one of my favorite '90s characters, and no one did him, even DC Direct. You know?
Yeah, they did Mattel did a Justice League Unlimited one, like a small 4-inch one, and that was a figure that was on my list. Honestly, that was on my list. I wanted to do him, and I wanted to do Monarch from Armageddon, because that was the first crossover that I read when I was a kid. Was that Armageddon 2001? And at that time, it was 10 years into the future. Like, I know, right? Who knows what can happen in 10 years?
Yeah, I love those comics, man. They're so good. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One thing I wanted to ask you, like, you were at Mattel for about 7 years, like
almost nine.
Okay, so you were there during like the rise of not the internet, but like Instagram and like social media, and you know. A decade ago, there were people like taking pictures of their action figures and posting it on the internet. Like, did you kind of see that like fan response start to like, you know, Mattel starting to like, you know, capitalize on that? And like, what was that like on the other side of things?
Frustrating, honestly, internally, because I was a fan and I was a designer. What it started off was websites. You know, there were only a few websites that you could go to. You know, you had Daniel Pickett's Action Figure Insider, and you know, very good friend of both of ours. And you know, those were the only places. Or you got Toy Fair magazine, or you got Tow Marts, right? Those are the only places you could go. And so as Facebook started getting bigger, and you started seeing like. It was mostly message boards and stuff that you'd see people talking about. You know, Scott Knight like spent a lot of time on the He-Man.org chat rooms, like talking at message boards. But it would be it was interesting to see it kind of to grow, because the loudest voices weren't necessarily the majority of people. Yeah. So it would start to, there would be times when it would hurt, because you'd have a very vocal group, but a very small group that would complain about things, but that's what would get focused on. But after a while, I started to realize that it's a tool, like it's a marketing tool. It's something we should be using.
So interesting. I know we're kind of running late here, but I can talk to you for hours. But like, here, tell me what you're up to now. So we know what happened with Mattel. I don't want to like dwell on it, but like that must have been kind of hard, right? I'm sure after you were let go.
It was. I was pretty devastated. I felt like that was like my other big Hollywood moment. You know, it was like at Comic-Con that year, because that was the first year that they had product designers working, and that was the first time I felt like I was a product designer. I wasn't just a packaging guy helping out. Just so desperate to like do that. And I got to talk to James Wan when he came by to look at the brand product, and it was just this phenomenal moment. It was just like so incredible. I was like, this is what I've been working for. This is what I wanted. Not necessarily the like recognition or talking, to just like, I'm making stuff that people are really excited about. And I say that, I try to, I want to be delicate about that, because packaging is very important. It's an important part of the process. But it wasn't what was fulfilling. Like, I wasn't fulfilled by it anymore. Like in the beginning I loved it, and I loved every part of it, but I wasn't fulfilled by it anymore. So I was good at it. I could do it, but I wanted to do the product part. But yeah, letting go was pretty devastating. I was pretty crushed. I'd been working pretty hard, but to be honest, I'm really glad it happened, because I've had so many different experiences since then that I never would have gotten to do if I was still there.
That's great, dude. You know what I mean? Like, I know you worked at DC Direct for a little bit. You've worked at, I think, weren't you working for like Dr. Seuss?
Yeah, I was there for a couple months before I decided we didn't want to move down there, and I didn't necessarily agree with some of the views that they had. So I'll just leave it at that.
So where are you working now? Like, obviously we have the Kickstarter. You just finished. Like, what are you up to these days?
I'm heavily freelancing with NECA right now.
Awesome, man.
I'm working with Trevor and Randy. That's another thing. Like, I went to PowerCon after I got laid off, and a sculptor friend of mine, Georgie, introduced me to Trevor because they had worked together, and Trevor was working at DC, used to work at NECA, and I just kind of like I hit it off with Trevor. We stayed in touch. He brought me in over at DC for a little bit, and then when he went back to NECA, we just stayed in touch ever since. I never really would have had that experience had I not been free. Like I wouldn't have gone in there and talked to him and everything. So I feel very lucky. I feel very lucky that I'm working. I really love Randy and Trevor. Trevor's he's great. Like he's super creative. He's got such a dry sense of humor. It's funny. Like right before COVID hit, I got to hang out with him, and I miss it. I wish I could go up to Burbank and hang out with him some more. But yeah. So anyway, I'm at NECA. I'm working on Turtles.
Hey, look at you! You got to work on DC. Now you get to work on Turtles. Like all of your like boyhood, like childhood stuff, you're getting to work on now, man.
I'm super lucky. Yeah, I feel very, very, very spoiled.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, why don't we conclude things for now?
Okay.
There's a lot of other stuff I could ask you, but we both have kids and wives and things like that, so we should get back to. So thanks so much for joining me tonight, Jason. It was
thanks,
great talking to you, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.